Hello, this is Rick Harnish. I'm the Executive Director of the High Speed Rail Alliance. Thank you very much for joining us today. We've got a very exciting program coming today. But first, for those who don't know who we are or are new to the organization, we're a member-supported nonprofit working to answer three questions, essentially. What is high-speed rail? What is high-speed rail? Why we need to build it, and what steps need to be taken in order to make it happen. And then we provide people like you the tools you need to help educate your elected leaders, whether it be at the state, the local, or the federal level, on what it is that your leaders can do to make it a reality. So if you haven't joined yet, and you like this program and you'd like to see more of them, please go to our website, highspeedrail.us, and go up to the corner and hit that Become a Member. We are, in fact, supported by members like you, and we really appreciate all the support as we help you make high-speed rail a reality. So we do have an exciting program today. I'd like to first introduce Johnny Kolbeck, who's the chair of our volunteer committee up in Madison, Wisconsin, to introduce our speaker. Thank you very much, Johnny.
Thanks so much, Rick. And hi, welcome everybody. Glad to have you here today. Like Rick said, I'm one of the co-chairs of our volunteer team here at the HSRA. So if you are interested in volunteering, certainly get in touch with us and we'd love to have you. But I also have the distinct privilege of introducing today's speaker to you all. So joining us from Amtrak, where he's the Senior Vice President of High-Speed Rail Development Programs, we have Mr. Andy Byford in the house. Just a little bit about Andy. Andy's a distinguished transportation leader with over 30 years of global experience in the public transit sector. He's a native of Plymouth, England, and a graduate of the University of Leicester. And he first began his career actually back in 1989 with the London Underground, where he was a station foreman. Now, over the years, he's had a number of positions, including serving in some leadership roles in transit agencies around the world. He was the CEO of the Toronto Transit Commission, the president of the New York City Transit Authority, and the commissioner of transport for the City of London. So whether it was, managing day-to-day operations on Australia's busiest rail line or overseeing the recent completion of the beloved Elizabeth line in London, most recently, Andy's career reflects a deep commitment to improving public transit systems and enhancing connectivity in cities and regions around the world. Now, his breadth of hands-on experience across multiple continents gives him a very unique global perspective and has helped prepare him for his latest and greatest challenge here, and most exciting, if I do say so myself, which is the possibility of bringing high-speed rail to the U.S. In his current position, Andy is playing a pivotal role in expanding and modernizing U.S. passenger rail, with a focus on introducing and advancing high-speed rail corridors across the country. We think Andy is really well suited to lead Amtrak's efforts to do so. And we know that promoting high-speed rail as a sustainable, efficient, and vital mode of transportation is crucial not only to his job and to us here on this call, but to the country and those that aren't aware of it. So I think he's come to the right place and the right audience today to speak to that. But before we let him go ahead and give his presentation, I just want to add there will be plenty of time for questions afterwards. So please send those our way in the chat. Our Deputy Director, Chris, will help manage those and introduce those questions to Andy once he's done. But without further ado, please welcome Mr. Andy Byford. Andy, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Well, look, first up, thank you, Rick, for inviting me to speak in front of your prestigious audience. And certainly we need all the help we can get. This is a national endeavor, and it needs to be a national effort to get the lawmakers, the public, everyone on side with, as you say, the key challenges of knowing what high-speed rail actually is, how great it is, how transformative it can be, but also what we need to do and how we need to go about it to make this thing a reality. So Johnny, thank you to you. Thanks for that kind intro. It's certainly been a fun career, and what attracted me to take what's quite a different challenge, actually, namely not being the boss. I've enjoyed being the boss. The TTC was great. New York City Transit was fantastic. Commissioner TfL, how great is that? But this is a very different challenge for me. This is one that is very single subject focused, whereas previously I had been overseeing the actual day-to-day operations of very big organizations such as Transport for London, the world's biggest integrated modal system. This is very different. And what attracted me was working for Amtrak. You know, what could be more iconic, more American than Amtrak? It is Americana writ large. That was the first reason. The second reason, very exciting times for Amtrak, as I'll say in my presentation. Lots going on. And thirdly, this is such an exciting time. There finally seems to be this sense of momentum and determination to make the breakthrough, to actually make high-speed rail a reality here in the US. So I'm very excited about this. This is something that I believe passionately in. I've been lucky enough to travel on the Shinkansen in Japan. I've been to Germany and ridden the ice. I've been on the TGV in France. You know, there's so many countries out there with high-speed rail, and yet the one that stands out is the US, where you know, there's so many compelling corridors that I think are made for this. So let me just pull up my presentation. That should come up now. Yeah, here we go. So can I get a thumbs up from, say, Rick? Can you see that okay? I'm getting where I am in the room, so I think we're good to go.
Yeah, you see the speaker view, just so you're aware, not the presentation view. But
okay, maybe I'll just ask you got that? That's good. So that's what you see. Okay, so good. Okay, right. Well, let me get into it then. As I said, I think it's a real new era. You've seen the title of the presentation, but also where we say Amtrak accelerates. These are exciting times, as I've said. So just a little bit though to kick things off. Now you know this. Amtrak is America's railroad. That's what this is what we do. You know this. There's lots of railway people on the call today. But here's some quick facts about us. And the one I was going to draw your attention to, actually, amongst all of these various bullet points, is the two down the bottom, nearly 29 million riders in 2023. And the bottom bullet point, I think, is the most compelling. That at the moment, we have a problem, and it's a nice problem to have, more demand for service than seats. I'd much rather be in that situation than carrying around thin air. So you look at some of the things that we've done, like we just launched our new Borealis service, which goes from Chicago up to the Twin Cities. Already, it's absolutely booming. It's amazing. People are just flocking to that service, and it won't be long before we launch our new Gulf service, reinstating that line from New Orleans to Mobile, Alabama. So it's actually a boom time for Amtrak. We're carrying record numbers of passengers, and that's good because our aim is to double our ridership by 2040 to get to 66 million riders. So these are
Andy,
big times.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think it might help if we could just try to get it into the full presenter view. Is that
just one
possible?
second? I'm sorry about this.
No problem.
I messed that up. I know about railways. I'm not the most technical person. Which is why I have a millennial colleague who does this.
Thank you to your millennial colleague.
Thank you, Andrew.
There we go. Perfect.
There
Thank
you go. Okay, so start again. So there you go. That was
wait, now we lost the audio.
okay.
There, audio's back.
Okay, good. Excellent. So we can get rid of that. Yeah, just 1 second.
Excellent.
Okay, so I think we're back.
Yes.
Okay, good, excellent. So it's that bottom item that I was drawing people's attention to. More demand for service and seats. These are boom times for Amtrak. So on to the next slide, which is the business update. I think that should work. Business update. Demand for our services is growing exponentially, which is fantastic. We are, as I said, carrying record numbers of people. And in order to do that in the short term, because in the short term, it's very difficult to just go out and buy a fleet off the shelf. In the short term, the best thing that we can do is make more efficient use of our existing fleet. And credit to my colleagues in operations who have done just that. So let's take as an example the Northeast Corridor, where in order to make better utilization, more intensive utilization of our Amfleet coaches and the locos, we double-end the trains so that you effectively have a push-pull operation, and that limits the number of turns that you have to do. So it's a much more efficient way of using our existing fleet. So we're pretty much putting out everything that we've got, but doing so in a more efficient manner. The other thing that's really exciting is, in addition to being America's railroad, we're actually essentially a construction company at the moment. We have a huge capital program going on, fueled by the IIJA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. So sometimes people say, wow, Amtrak's doing well. You've got $66 billion. Well, that's not quite true, actually. 22 billion is assigned, that has been assigned to particular projects, things like the Gateway project under the Hudson and the other work that we're doing on the Northeast Corridor and elsewhere. But the other 44 billion is available to us and to others to get via grants for specific projects. So we're very active in the grant space at the moment. We just received some a very nice influx of CRISI funding, again, to do critical work as part of this overall push to absolutely change and modernize every aspect of our operation. And that's important because, as I said on the previous slide, we've got this absolute aspiration, determination to double our ridership by 2040 and to reach net zero by 2045. So these are big challenges. We're very focused on it. Everyone in the organization is focused on these key targets under Stephen Gardner's leadership and our president, Roger Harris. We're determined to transform every aspect of our service. So that includes things like buying new fleets. We've got a proposal out for a completely new long-distance fleet. Upgrading key lines. We've just upgraded, for example, the Lincoln service between Chicago and St. Louis. That was a 90-mile-an-hour railway. Not anymore. It's 110. So there's lots that you can do to incrementally improve in addition to the big transformative programs. And we're not forgetting the soft stuff as well. That's really important. We under our new commercial director's leadership, we've got an aspiration to transform every aspect of the onboard service. So reinstating dining facilities, upgrading the sleeper cars that we've got, changing the things like the soft furnishings. I went into a refurbished sleeper car just the other day. It looks fantastic. All of the carpets have been redone. The wall fabrics have been redone. It looks really good. So we're really trying to make that onboard service better as well. Okay, on to the next one, which is, well, what kind of an economic impact does Amtrak have? Well, you can see the stats for yourselves there. And this is a key point that I always stress when, and so do my colleagues, whenever we meet with elected officials. You know, there are people out there who sometimes say, well, why do we need a passenger railroad? You know, people like cars, people like planes. Well, apart from the obvious thing that I think America would grind to a halt without a passenger railroad, look at those economic impacts that we have from this program that we're working on, particularly with regard to the big projects that we've got, and you can see some good imagery there. 9.2 billion in annual economic impact nationally, made up of direct and indirect benefits. And, you know, this is about job creation. You can see there, we've got 23,000 employees, so, you know, good, well-paid jobs. But we create 36,000 additional jobs, or rather we support 36,000 additional jobs. And the critical piece is this is across the US. So there are myriad, multiple suppliers in pretty much every state that benefit from the economic spend that Amtrak has as we progressively upgrade our service. So not only are we serving rural communities directly with people, you know, being able to take the train and rely on the train in many places, but also there are these historic investments that's having a ripple effect across communities because we're spending money and creating wealth and creating jobs, which I think actually with an incoming administration is a very, very positive message. Now, so where does high speed fit into this? Well, it creates real economic opportunity. And again, I'd like to cite some good stats here. Our belief is, and there's stats that if you don't believe the Amtrak stats, take them from what Acela said. Every billion invested in high-speed rail creates 24,000 jobs. That's a huge achievement. Could you just bear with me 1 second? Is there a problem? They're not. I'm moving them down on this, but why are they not moving on the slide? I'm seeing them move on here. Sorry, folks. For some reason, the screen I'm looking at, so you see me looking at the camera, shows the slides move, but it appears they weren't moving. So hopefully they're now synchronized. So anyway, back to where I was speaking. Every billion invested in high-speed rail creates 24,000 jobs. Don't take our word for it. That was something that Acela research drew out. And then take an example. Look at that beautiful piece of kit in the picture there. That's one of our new Acela high-speed trains soon to hit the rails. 60% of the value of one of those high-speed trains flows to suppliers. That was a stat that Alstom gave us. And so again, it's about putting real economic benefit into the community. And that's electricians, it's cement workers, it's steel laborers, many more professionals, good paying long-term jobs, union jobs that benefit people across the US. So I know I'm preaching to the converted on this audience in terms of talking about high speed, but it really does create hard economic opportunity, which I think is a bipartisan benefit, not just for one party or the other. Everyone should see that this is actually a bit of a no-brainer, in my opinion. So on to the next slide, which again doesn't seem to be synchronizing. I can see that, that's not on there. Sorry, I need to be on this. Okay, so let's talk about investment then in high-speed rail. And again, a bit more on where the community see those benefits. Sorry about these little gremlins we're having. For some reason, the two computers will not sync up when I press page down. So look, this is fairly recent news. If I go to the bottom bullet point, first of all, Brightline West and Siemens, that new facility or that order that has been made in Horseheads in New York. Look at the statistics there, 60 million investment, creating 300 plus long-term jobs, and a dedicated, first of its kind, dedicated high-speed rail production facility. That will serve the US really well, because this is a facility that is being constructed to be forward-facing. So when other either Amtrak or other organizations want to buy high-speed trains in the future, there's a US-made, no Buy America issues, US-made product that's being built up in New York State. California, the high-speed rail there, you've got some good stats there. 14,000 jobs statewide, 92,000 job years to date. You know, there's lots of commentary made about California high-speed rail, but that is huge, generated $7 billion in labor income and $18 billion in economic output to date. The critics of that project always neglect to mention that is a huge economic benefit to the state of California. And then with the top one, our own Alstom Acela facility, being built up in Hornell in Alstom's plant. Again, you can see the stats there, not just locally to Hornell, New York, but a further $590 million invested with 170 suppliers across 27 states. So again, the benefits are very real, and they percolate, they ripple across the whole of the US. Okay, so what I want to talk about now is further points about how economic expanding service, is vital to continued economic growth. If we can push on with this program that we've got, and obviously the administration is changing, we're confident that that will be the case, we can see continued economic growth. And I think that's a really powerful message whenever an administration changes. Stick with what works, stick with what's successful. Because if we do double the ridership, we will get an additional 1.1 billion. We can deliver an additional 1.1 billion in direct benefits, and then an additional 6.9 billion in indirect benefits, support for an additional 26,000 permanent jobs, and 616,000 job years in capital investments benefiting communities across the US. So again, I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but this is hard-nosed fact. This is the economic dividend, if you will, the economic dividend of investing in high-speed rail. Even if you don't like railroads, if you aren't going to use them, this has a ripple effect to the benefit of the US economy and to the US writ large. Let's talk some more about then what we're going to do in terms of our expansion. And I will come on to the specific of the high-speed route between Dallas and Houston, but our focus is not on just Dallas to Houston. It is on actually addressing the whole of the Texas market, which is important because if we are to double our ridership by 2040, we will need to see expansion of service across the whole of the US. And that's something we think is a very powerful message. It's not all about the Northeast Corridor. It's about reconnecting communities, providing more service where we already have it, providing new service where we have never had it, and in some cases reinstating service. And a good example of that would be along the Gulf Coast. But let's talk about Texas first of all. There's what is known as the Texas Triangle. You can see it there. So you've got Dallas, you've got Houston, Austin, and San Antonio. That triangle needs to be better served. The state of Texas is growing exponentially, so we have big plans for all three sides of that triangle. I'll come on to Dallas to Houston high-speed service in a second. One of the lines that we definitely want to upgrade, there is an existing route between Houston and San Antonio. The Texas Eagle goes along there. That is a service that definitely needs to be upgraded. We want to see that line, that corridor sped up. I rode it just the other day. We want to address the Dallas-Fort Worth-Heuston corridor. We want to make the Sunset Limited daily. At the moment, it's 3 times a week. And we also want to push on the Heartland Flyer to go up to Kansas, to Newton, Kansas, rather than its current termination point in Oklahoma. So there's definitely lots more to do in the state of Texas, and not just the one that garners all the attention, namely the high speed. And this is, I find, an interesting chart. I learned a bit about Texas when I first came into this job. What we're aiming to do here is show how big Texas is. I had no idea that if you overlay the map of Texas onto Western Europe, you're covering huge swathes of Western Europe territory. It's a very large percentage. I had no idea Texas was that big. So starting from a point of, this is a really big state that needs more trains, the map on the right is a map of Germany and the Deutsche Bahn network. And as you can see on that map, Deutsche Bahn cover pretty much the whole of Germany. And there's very, not just high speed services, there's very high frequency services. It really is turn up and go. And yet, if we go to the next slide, what we're doing here on this slide is juxtaposing a German scenario, 2 German cities, in this case, Berlin and Hamburg, against Houston and San Antonio. And the interesting thing about this, I think you're on the right slide, right? Yeah, you are. The interesting thing about this is that where Berlin and Hamburg are not dissimilar in size to Houston and San Antonio, and they're very similar, in fact, to the distance, 180 miles versus 197 miles apart, with a drive time of similar duration as you'd expect. Look at the difference between the Texan cities and the German cities in terms of frequency of service. 60 daily trains in Germany, less than 1 in Texas. So I think that really nails the point that if you compare somewhere of similar size in terms of the cities, I get that rural Texas isn't as populated as Germany. It really is striking just how underserved Texas, as an example, 1 of 50, is, and we intend to do something about that. So let's get towards then high speed as a concept. We see high speed very much as part of a puzzle, as part of a solution of a transportation puzzle. It's not in its own right a panacea. It's not right for every route, but we very much see high speed as one of the new elements to fit in with, to create the picture to fit in with the other elements of the puzzle. So what else do you need? You've got high speed. You need high speed, can't just terminate nowhere with no onward connections. It needs to interact seamlessly, easily with good transit at either end. So for Dallas to Houston, we'll be connecting with DART at one end and with the Houston system at the other end. That's what good transit looks like. It's part of a package. If you go to, let's take an example from where I'm from in the UK. If you go to the Eurostar, at either end, let's take St. Pancras as an example, you've got underground connections, overground connections, mainline connections, bikes, taxis. It's very walkable, excuse me. You go to the other end, the Gare du Nord, and you're straight onto multiple metro lines and the RER. That's what good high speed looks like, absolute connectivity. And then the other pieces of the puzzle are adding the if you like, the last mile connection. So where people want to walk, where they want to cycle. Again, that represents good practice. Plus, the whole service needs to be fully accessible. And then finally, links to conventional rail, which I already touched upon. Again, going back to my St. Pancras example, when you get off the Eurostar, it's very easy to go actually sideways to East Midlands Railway to go up to, say, Derby or Leicester or Sheffield. It's very easy for those onward connections. So that's how you create the puzzle. We see high speed as a new part of that puzzle. And that's why Amtrak were kind enough to bring me in. We want to create that modernized, holistic network so that you really do have the right mode and the right solution for the right corridor. Which brings me on to Texas and to Dallas Houston, which I said we'd come on to. So people say to me, why Dallas to Houston? I would say to you or to them, because of all the potential corridors in the US, and there are lots of good potential corridors, this represents the one that is probably the most compelling. It ticks all the boxes, because what do you need? You need high travel demand between city pairs. Well, if you look at the traffic on the I-45, there's certainly high travel demand. There's a lot of people going up and down that interstate. It's a very crowded interstate. I've ridden it. I actually rode the bus between Dallas and Houston. It was a very comfortable service, but it took forever to get out of Dallas because of the traffic jams. The other alternative is, of course, to fly. You got the 4 airports, 2 in Dallas, 2 in Houston, and there is a pretty intensive shuttle service, but increasingly crowded airports, runway delays. You know, it takes ages to taxi out to the runway. I would say that do nothing is not an option. I'll come on to that. But what else do you need? You need good onward connections to the point I just made. Well, you've got them. You've got transit in Dallas in the form of DART. You've got Amtrak already serving those cities. And then you've got the TRE up north of Dallas, and you've got Metro Rail in Houston. So you've got those onward connections that you need to have. So that is another tick in the box. You need to have city pairs that are the right distance apart. We always say the sweet spot is between 200 and 800 miles. Well, this is 240 miles apart. You need sizable populations at either end. Which you certainly have. Dallas and Houston are the 4th and 5th fastest growing metropolises in the US. So you've got those elements there. Plus, you've got pretty straightforward topography. It's pretty flat. So in all the variables that you look for, it's pretty much a check in every box. What else do you need? You need strong political and labor and public support. I've described that as growing. It's very strongly supported this project in the cities of Dallas and Houston, and also at the intermediate stop, which is, as you can see on the map there, in the Brazos Valley. It's a place called College Station. That support is not universal. There's still a job to do in terms of people in rural Texas who maybe aren't as supportive. And that, of course, links to political support, where again we've got that strong political support in the cities. There's still some work to do on the politics and getting people to truly understand not only what's in it for the cities, but what's in it for the states in terms of the whole state, the economic benefit that this will bring. The right of way, some of it has been secured, not all of it, so that still remains to be done. And then there's the small matter of the funding package, which will be north of $30 billion with the current project that we're looking at. But my argument would be, yeah, that's a big chunk of money. Try adding a lane both ways on the I-45, which if you don't bring in this high-speed service, you are definitely going to have to do something about the I-45, which would take a hell of a long time, would cost an absolute fortune. And is that really what we should be doing? Ever more widening roads rather than looking at taking some of the pressure off those roads, for which, of course, there would be a benefit for motorists. We believe our calculations show 12,500 cars off the I-45 every day. I also make the pitch that if you want to add capacity to roads, you have to add lanes. If you want to add capacity to a railroad, you add trains. So you don't have to, once the railroad is built, widen it or make it take more land once it's built, because you just add trains. As long as you're within the limitations of the signaling service, the way you increase capacity is to run more trains. On a road, the way you add more capacity is to add more lanes. That in itself, as I've said, costs a huge amount of money, and it also takes up land. And is it really the right thing when we're trying to be more environmentally friendly? So lots to do, but here's the pitch. If we can pull this off, it's not yet a done deal. There's a lot of work still to be done. There's the matter of getting the funding package, the political support, the land. So it's not yet a done deal. We're still, as Amtrak, we're still looking at this project. We're in what's called the CID program, in the third phase of the CID program. But if we can pull this off, this would be a sub 90-minute journey between the two cities at 240 miles apart at an average speed of 186 miles per hour. That would actually be, with one intermediate stop, the fastest average train speed in the world. So not the fastest top speed, not the fastest speed, but the fastest average speed. So this would be transformative for not just the cities that it serves, but the whole of the state of Texas, because if our revenue and ridership forecasting is correct, and we're, as part of CID, we're doing more granular research, this will have a huge economic benefit into the Texan economy, which would benefit all of Texas, not just the recipient cities or the cities that we serve, but the whole of rural Texas as well. So lots to do. I hope that gave you a good insight into not only what we're doing on Dallas to Houston, but also more broadly what's going on in Amtrak, which is, as I said earlier, a very exciting time. So I'll stop sharing at that point and throw it back to Johnny, I think, and Chris, who are going to now handle the Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much for this. We really appreciate your coming. This is an exciting project, and 90 minutes between those cities would be transformative. At the end, you mentioned the CID process, which is corridor ID. And I guess I was wrong about where you are. You said in step 3?
That's correct. So maybe I'll just say a couple of things so people understand what the CID program is all about. It's a national program, and there are currently 69 projects in CID in the different stages. And I'm very proud of the fact that with my colleague Jed Poster, who's led on this, we are the first, and I think we're the only at the moment, project that's in step 3. So this step 1, and this is germane to all of the projects, you put together a scope of work. So you flush out what it is that the project's aiming to achieve. Step 2, you have to go sequentially, of course. Step 2, you put together what's called a service delivery plan. So you're setting out what you will do with an FRA grant were you to be accepted into step 3. And step 3, we have been accepted. There's a $63 million with a 20% match, so $80 million grant overall. That will enable us to do more preliminary engineering, granular ridership and revenue forecasting, plus a review of the environmental approvals that we've got to date. So lots of work to do in that. It's about a 1-year program, but we're very proud to be in CID step 3, Rick.
So I asked this because I'm a little confused. So there is an approved EIS.
Right.
So is this more detail or is it adjusting the EIS?
No, it's because 3 years have elapsed since that was done. You have to review an EIS after 3 years to see if anything's changed. So we're not anticipating problems, but it's good practice to, in case something has changed that would otherwise need to be addressed, you have to do that 3-year review. So that's what we're currently doing.
Okay, so then once step 3 is done, then the next step is to go for construction.
FSP, which for those who don't know is a Fed-State partnership. There's a national program for Fed-State partnership, and that's the program from which California and Brightline have both benefited. And that, if we get into FSP, and it's a competitive bid, there's no guarantees. That would enable us to do then detailed engineering. There's preliminary engineering in CID, but you would then be doing the detailed up to final engineering. Again, I would stress with no definite outcome, we're still in that planning and due diligence phase. We're still exploring the viability of the project. We would still need to put together the funding stack to make this thing a reality. We'd still need to get the land that we would need and the sensitivities around that, which I very much understand. So that it's not a done deal yet, but FSP will be the next port of call.
Excellent. And then you mentioned growing political support, which is very important. I'm sorry, I wanted to ask one more before that, one more detail. So the way the EIS process works, you're looking at Dallas to Houston, and the Metropolitan Planning Organization is looking at Dallas to Fort Worth. Really, they should be looked at as one package. But what kind of coordination is going on in order to make sure that those two line up?
Sure. Well, there's actually then a third project, and all three are within CID. Our project, Dallas to Houston, NCT COG, who are looking at Dallas to Fort Worth, and then our colleagues over at TxDOT are looking at a third project, which is upgrading the existing freight line, but that would be much more of a regional stopping service. So we're talking to both parties. I need to stress they are separate projects, but obviously it would be foolish to not build, say, Dallas to Houston, to build it without at least allowing for a potential onward connection to Fort Worth. So we are in discussions to make sure that there is that synergy, but they are separate projects. That's for others to manage that project.
And then the last, so growing political support, I've come to the conclusion you really need to at least have active tacit approval from the governor. And Brightline, Florida did benefit from support of a Republican governor to get built between Orlando and Miami. What needs to happen? How can we help get the governor of Texas on board?
Well, I'm not going to comment too much on the politics. That's for another day. But what I would say is I do agree with you. In any project like this, you really do need to have the resident politicians, whether that be in Texas, Florida, or anywhere else. You really do need them to want the project, because they are the governor, they're the elected officials. Of course, we should listen to elected officials. And what I can say is that Governor Abbott has ridden the Shinkansen. He's been to Japan several times, and he's ridden it. So he doesn't need to be educated on what high-speed rail is. He's ridden it. He's actually ridden that fabulous service. So I think in terms of what you can be doing, and I wouldn't make it unique to Governor Abbott, I think generally do what you currently do, which is help either directly educate public elected officials on the benefits and the realities and truths about high-speed rail, or do it via the various people who are on the call and other members that you've got. I think one of the big challenges in the US is there's a lot of ignorance about high-speed rail, and genuinely, I don't mean that in a pejorative fashion. I mean, literally, people don't necessarily know what high-speed is. If you've never experienced it, you might have an idea what it is, you might think, well, it's sort of high speed, it keeps slowing down. But no, what we're talking about for true high speed is a dedicated corridor upon which high-speed trains run up and down at obviously high speed, but very intense frequencies. And it's fully enclosed, so there's no crossings, there's no prospect of a train encountering an obstacle. And also there's no interlining. You're not interoperating with freight trains, stopping trains, regional trains. It's a true high-speed corridor. And a good example of that would be the Eurostar between London and Paris. Very few people now fly between those two cities. Why would you? You go downtown to downtown on a one-seat ride in great comfort, have a meal, have a drink, do what you want. A true high speed is something that I think once we get one line up and running in this country, I think other mayors and other city pairs will clamor for it.
I think you're absolutely right. And that certainly was proven with multiple things, but the one was, I think most people were convinced that Madrid to Seville would not work. It would work long enough for the people to get to the World's Fair and then go back to being Renfe.
Well, Rick, sorry to cut across you. Another good example is the TGV. When the TGV first went in between Paris and Lyon, people said, oh, it's a white elephant. And for that matter, the Shinkansen, I've spoken to people at JRC about this. There was a lot of skepticism. People said, it's a white elephant, no one will use it, they'll keep flying. Now look at the ridership that both Shinkansen in Japan has and also TGV, the way that the network has gone from Paris to Lyon, a one-off originally. Now the tentacles of the TGV spread across France. And we've seen similar positive expansion in Germany, beginning in the UK, we've got HS1, but Italy, all across Europe, it's just the norm. People that over a certain distance, that is what people flock to.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that with the TGV, the farmers were very concerned and very adamant that their cows would not give milk. And I remember riding the train one day, and there was a big herd next to the train track going, I wonder if they give milk. I bet they probably do. Chris, do we have, I've been watching, it looks like we've got some good questions from the audience.
Yes, it's been a lively discussion. Thank you so much for giving this presentation. And for anyone wondering, we will have a recording of this available within a few days at hsrail.org/events. But let's start right at the top with the questions. There were, as you maybe can expect, there are many variations on this question. Andy, you shared some thoughts about how economic benefits might carry weight with the incoming administration. Can you or would you like to say any more at this stage about what to expect for passenger rail and high-speed trains over the next few years? Or challenges and opportunities that you foresee?
Yeah, I mean, look, people keep saying to me, well, what do you think is going to happen? I don't have a crystal ball, the same as anyone else. But I think the arguments transcend politics if they're properly deployed. The incoming administration wants, President-elect Trump is a developer. That's what he does. He builds things. So I think we can make the case that this will create jobs. This will be prestigious for the US. This will create economic wealth. Who doesn't want that? So I don't see, I've never seen the politics as binary, as in, one administration means we get high speed, the other means we don't. You might have to vary the pitch. You might have to stress more the economic benefit, the job creation. But I think, as I said at the start, the economics and the facts are compelling. We just got to make sure that we present that case and that we transcend politics such that people truly understand what high speed is and what the benefits are that it can bring. And I think I'm confident we will be able to continue to make that case.
Great, thank you. Malik asks a question that is related. High-speed rail projects often face public resistance or skepticism. How do you plan to engage in and win over communities along the proposed Dallas-Houston-Austin corridor or others that you might be working on?
Sure. Well, I think largely it is, and you have to really work at it. A lot has been done. because bear in mind, this is a project that Amtrak inherited. We inherited this from Texas Central, which was a private entity that had made progress on this and had gained some key decisions, including the what's called the rule of particular applicability as to which type of rolling stock could be deployed upon the route. But I think it is important that you excel at selling the message to not only talk about the benefits that riders of the trains will have, which what we're offering is it will be a sub 90-minute journey, which you just cannot replicate going to the plane. Yes, the time in the air is short, but factor in getting to the airport, going through security, sitting, taxiing, takeoff, flying, landing, and then doing the reverse at the other end. You cannot replicate that in air travel. You certainly can't replicate a 90-minute journey on the road. So that would be huge benefit for the people that use the trains. But I think the education piece comes in also the broader benefits to the good people of, in this case, Texas, in that there would be that massive economic benefit to the state in terms of jobs created on the directly for the construction of the system. That's going to take about 7 to 8 years of construction. That's good paying jobs. Then once the line is up and running, operating and maintaining it, someone's got to drive the train, someone's got to maintain the tracks and the overhead wires. Again, direct benefits. Those are good union paying jobs for Texans. But then there's the third element, which is the knock-on effect in terms of this, the benefit from suppliers. We would look to use local suppliers to both in the construction phase and in the operations phase. Then the revenue that is derived from ridership. Again, we're checking this. We're doing much more granular work over the next year to truly get 50 years worth of granular ridership and revenue forecasting. At the moment, the post-COVID business case looks really strong. And that worried me to begin with when I first came into this post. Would in a post-COVID Zoom world, would the ridership have dipped right away? Not at all. There's still very a strong projected demand, and if the ridership and the revenue are what we believe that they can be, that will have a massive positive impact to the Texan economy, which will benefit the whole of Texas, not just the two recipient cities and College Station in the middle. This can be money that is poured back into, among other places, rural Texas. So I think, Chris, it's about making sure people understand what it is. People say, well, it's going to take up huge amounts of land. It's not an interstate. The right of way for a high-speed train is way narrower than an interstate. But again, I'd stress the point I made. I do understand people's concerns. We don't want to ride roughshod over individuals. We want to try to get this to win this argument and to make this project happen with people's support.
Thank you. And continuing with this theme, Tyler asks, does Amtrak ensure that local municipalities are investing in the areas immediately surrounding the stations before implementing new service routes?
Well, I think we have a very good record in that regard. We try to work with local communities and spend our money across the US, but also use local suppliers whenever we can, and be alive to what particular concerns either local residents and or their elected officials have. So good examples would be where we have progressively renovated stations, we've made them accessible. We're trying to be very responsive to communities in terms of the type of service that they want. Now, obviously, and this is a truism for any project, you can't please everyone all the time. But what we try to do is be good neighbors and try to run projects and then to run services that are consistent with what people want and to the needs of that particular locale.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And speaking of being good neighbors, Tom asks, what is Amtrak doing to work more closely with affected landowners to address concerns that they might have?
Do you mean specifically in Texas or more generally?
I don't believe it's.
I'm good. Well, let me just give a general response then. What what we try to do in any of our projects, and let's take, for example, the huge amount of works that are going on the Northeast Corridor at the moment, where we're progressively upgrading the corridor to make the Acela service quicker. We put a great deal of attention on local community engagement. It's something that A, we have to do, and B, we want to do. You don't just you don't just turn up and start building. You need to make sure that the community understands what the impact's going to be. You make sure you understand local community concerns. As the project is progressing, good practice is to set up either contact lines or in some cases, local community offices. So if people have a concern about dust or noise or the impact, you can help educate them, but also take their feedback and adjust projects to make sure that while there's inevitably in any big project, there's some disruption. It's impossible to not have any disruption. What you're trying to do is be good neighbors and to minimize the impact and be super responsive. So if a problem occurs, you know who to go to. It's not some faceless bureaucracy. You've got a one-stop shop to hopefully go and fix the issue about which you're concerned.
Thank you. Breck asks, would you like to comment on the pros and cons of rail nationalization, such as with tolled open access for private operators on nationalized rights-of-way?
Well, I've seen it, of course. Being from the UK, I've experienced that. I mean, I'm old enough to remember British Rail, and British Rail had its faults, but in many ways was a fabulous service. But in the 90s, it would have been under the Major government. British Rail was privatized and was broken up into a number of train operating companies. Then you had the rolling stock companies who owned the rolling stock, freight companies, and then what initially was called Railtrack, now Network Rail, to be the infrastructure owner. And I think that's been informative. Now it's going the other way. The train operating companies are being brought back under national ownership. And the way I'd look at it is, I think there's pros and cons. I think there's definitely a place for the private sector, particularly in helping identify, construct, and finance new railroads. I'm very impressed. I'm obviously aware of what Brightline do, for example. I've ridden on Brightline. It's a great service. It really is. I've ridden up from Miami up to, where did I go? Up to Cocoa Beach, I think. And the service was great. But I think I am a believer, putting my cards on the table, I am a believer in a national railroad. Sometimes people say to me, when you get these high-speed services up and running, who's going to operate them? Well, the jury's out on that. My board will decide that. But I do believe that there's a very strong argument for a national network where it's very easy for customers to comprehend. You've got a single ticketing system. There's interoperability between routes. Very simple, straightforward signage so that it's not confusing, particularly if you're going between operators. I do believe that there's a lot to be said for a national operator, but I wouldn't rule out the fact that you can have other players such as Brightline, and we wish them every luck in what they're doing in Florida, and for that matter with the line in the desert that they're currently constructing.
Thanks. We have a couple of questions about the Northeast Corridor. Paul asks, can you say more about what can be done to give the Northeast Corridor faster service and at more affordable prices?
Sure. Well, on the what can be done is what we are doing. So there's a lot of reconstruction going on. With the Acela train, the Acela is a high-speed train. The existing ones we have can do 150 miles an hour. The new ones will do 160. But the impediment for that service, and where it differs from a true, from a new build high-speed service, is the Acela is operating over infrastructure that was, in some cases, built back in Civil War times. Very, very old tunnels. The Frederick Douglass Tunnel is a new build in Maryland to circumvent a very old tunnel on the approach to Baltimore. So that takes out one of the obstacles that causes the train to have to slow right down. I think we go at 30 miles an hour through the existing tunnel. So in some cases, you're replacing infrastructure, straightening curves, upgrading overhead catenary, addressing other impediments, such as there's the Susquehanna Bridge, which is being addressed. but also where there's a bridge over the river at Newark, which is a lifting bridge, and it's a very old bridge. It's not particularly high off the water, so when there's a boat wants to go underneath, that bridge has to be lifted. So obviously, when it's lifted, that impedes through service, but also the bridge has a habit of getting stuck. So what are we doing? We're rebuilding the bridge. If you go up on the Northeast Corridor, you can see we're something like 70% complete on replacing that bridge. It's built much higher, and will mean you don't have to have this lifting capability, and you won't have to interrupt service. So it's good. It's about a 10-year project with lots of constituent parts. We can take at least an hour off the service Boston to DC once that's finished. There's a lot to do. You still will have some sections where you're not able to do that 160, but the way you address this is to tackle each of the bottlenecks and each of the areas that cause the seller to have to slow down.
Okay, thank you. And then Lewis asks, is there a firm start date for the new Acela train sets on the Northeast Corridor?
Very soon. They're in their final testing at the moment. The FRA and our test teams are working very closely together, and I can't remember the exact number of test runs we've done, but there's a huge number that have already been achieved. And what I can say is a good friend of mine, actually one of my colleagues at Amtrak, he's one of the test crew. He's one of the engineers, and he said it is just a fabulous train. It really is. We've got a very straight section in New Jersey, which is about 18 miles long. The trains can get up to the absolute full speed. And that train, it gets up to 160, and he said it wants to go a lot faster. That is a very powerful piece of equipment. And the other thing, the feedback that we've received is it's very smooth. It's also bigger. It's got more capacity than the existing Acelas. So we'll have more of them, and they'll be able to carry more people. And we're really not far off now in terms of getting them. So watch this space. You're about to see those new Acelias deployed very soon.
Great, thank you. Let's try to get just a couple more questions. I think this one came from Malik again. Given your experience in London and Toronto, how will you apply international best practices to ensure the success of the work that you're doing for Amtrak?
Sure. Well, I think you learn from others. You see what works well. You see where other projects maybe have got into difficulty. So one piece of best practice that I always cite whenever I'm asked this kind of question is well, it's two I'd say. First of all, make sure you lock the scope down of a project before you commit to a timescale and budget, because the killer for any big project is scope creep. Where you might come under pressure to, well, let's get started straight away before we've fully understood the scope. No, you are building in trouble. You almost guarantee you will overrun on schedule and you'll overrun on cost. Or if you allow scope creep, where you might come under pressure, well, can we just have this? Can we just have that? You've got to lock the scope down. So you've got to do all those hard yards, got to do all that work before you stick a spade in the ground, so that once the scope is settled, it's settled. No more changes unless you absolutely have to make sure then that you can deliver on your promises of it'll open by X for a value of Y. And secondly, in actually then executing that project, do so in a partnership approach, an alliance. Truly a good project benefits from having the designers, the architects, the contractors, the future operator, all working together to the same aim, not a combative, litigious contractual arrangement that you sometimes see projects fall into. So I think if you've seen what works and what doesn't work, the best chance of success is to see what works and to deploy it and copy it, shamelessly copy it.
Great. Last question comes from Alex Kaufman, the other co-chair with Johnny of our volunteer committee. He asks, as the main federal entity working for high-speed rail in the US, is Amtrak able to do some level of top-down network planning for high-speed rail, or do you support projects as they appear?
No, I think it should be, my view is it should be the former, in that there's real power in looking at this from a sort of a national perspective, and Rick will be pleased to know I watched the tape of the discussion you had with Congressman Moulton the other day, and there was a discussion about the benefits of incrementally building up a network. But you've got to understand, what is the big picture? What are you trying to achieve? So Amtrak has been working on a strategy. We put together a strategy which we should be able to publish soon. I wanted to publish it earlier in the year, but for various reasons we've waited. But that will set out how we think you make the case corridor by corridor to maximize your chances of success. Going back to those variables that I talked about in my presentation, but we should do so from a strategic perspective, understanding where do we want to ultimately get to. And where we want to ultimately get to is where it makes sense, a truly national network of high-speed lines. So the reason I say where it makes sense is, you're not going to connect every community with every other community. It's where that mode will make the real difference and then interact with those other elements of the jigsaw that I put up in my presentation. So yes, I think Amtrak should take the lead on it. It would be odd if we didn't as America's railroad, but we don't do that in isolation. And we build on the work that other people have done. And certainly, there's other players out there, yourselves, there's APTA, the US High Speed Rail Association. There's a lot of good thinking already being done. And collectively as a community, we should pull forward with one voice. And that is how you make the argument to elected officials, where there's only finite tax dollars out there. That's how you make the argument that this really will benefit the US. This will be as transformative, I'm going to say. This would be, if we get together a national high-speed network, it will be as transformative as the interstate construction was in the 50s. Imagine where the US would be with no interstate system. Well, the next big frontier, if you like, is a true high-speed network for the United States. That's why I took this job, and I passionately believe we can and we must push on and make it a reality.
Well, thank you. We'll have to wrap it up here. But any concluding thoughts from either Andy or Rick about where we go from here, how Alliance members and other allies can help?
I'll defer to Rick on that.
Well, thank you. Thank you again for being here. I really appreciate that. I love the way you just wrapped it up. We do need a national vision. I'm glad that Amtrak's working on that. I'm excited to see and help get into the next step for Texas High-Speed Rail. And thank you again for being here. I really appreciate your time and your efforts. So
you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yep. And we will talk again soon. And thanks to the audience for joining us. Again, if you liked this program and you want more, please go to highspeedrail.us, and click the Become a Member button. So thank you all again for coming, and we will ride again soon. Thanks.